Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LinkedIn Live session by Forrester, where we're here to talk about sales planning. Now, I know it's probably not the first thing that all you sales leaders out there think and look forward to in terms of planning season, but we're right in the thick of things. And planning is critically important because you got to make sure that you actually come up with a number for 2021 that is realistic, that you can hit, and then you ask for the right number of resources to help make sure you get there. And this year, it's really hard. It's hard in any year forecasting an annual year, but this year particularly because of the pandemic, sales leaders are really struggling to try to figure out, how do I know what to commit to the board, to the CEO? What number looks realistic? I certainly don't want to come up with sandbagging and come up with a number that's too low, but I don't want to sign up for something that's way out of whack and way out of my league that I can't actually hit. And so we're here to talk about what sales leaders should be thinking about for 2021, how to make sure that they go into this season with the right data and that they come up with a plan that is taking into account the key trends and is a plan that they and their sales team can hit. So should be a great session. I'm Phil Harrell. I'm the VP and Group Director of Forrester Sales Research Group here. Prior to coming here, I spent 25 years in sales and sales leadership jobs at companies like Akamai and HubSpot and Pegasystems. And I came over here 5 years ago to be an analyst and to help sales leaders with these kinds of problems. And I'm joined by my colleague, Mike Pregler. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, Phil, thanks. So hi, Mike Pregler. I lead the sales executive services here at Forrester. I've been here about 2.5 years. Before that, a little over 30 years of experience as a sales and sales leader with companies like HP, Unisys, and SAP.
Okay, so Mike, let's get started. Let's jump right into it. What have you seen sales leaders going through recently? How are they handling the planning process given this crazy year that we've all had?
Yeah, it's, the question that I'm seeing as I'm talking with a lot of sales leaders is that they're really asking a lot more questions about what's normal, what will change, how should I optimize my organization? So obviously, as you mentioned earlier, sales leaders want to have an achievable number, but they also want to, of course, be successful. So they want to ensure that they've got the right resources and deploy those resources in the right ways for success. So they're really asking a lot of questions about what's going on in the market, what should I be including in my planning activity, and how can I build my team up for success?
And what about the 5 planning assumptions? I know every year we launch something called planning assumptions for sales leaders and sales operations leaders and sales enablement leaders. Mike, what are some of the 5 sales leadership planning assumptions that sales leaders should take into account when they're thinking about 2021?
Sure. Well, every year, Forrester Serious Decisions puts out a series of planning assumptions. So these are things that we think help guide sales leaders to embed in their plans and help set them up for success. And this year we put together 5, looking out at the market, looking at the trends around selling and the trends around buyers, and came up with the 5 things that we think really set you up as a sales leader for success. And that's first is using data and technology for a competitive advantage. And I talked a little bit more about that. The second is looking at your sales structure and rebalancing your sales structure to optimize both for buyer experiences and for cost efficiency. And then third, maximizing and scaling e-commerce. It kind of relates to rebalancing your sales structure. We see a lot of organizations that are looking to leverage e-commerce to manage or work in certain segments of their business. And a lot of that's buyer driven. Some buyers want to buy through a very much of a touchless type of experience. And then we also see sales leaders are recommending their planning assumptions that sales leaders modernize their lead gen and prospecting. And that's building more discipline into that prospecting process. And then finally, looking for those organizations that are leveraging the indirect channel, that they start to build out partner ecosystems. And these are ecosystems where partners work together with the supplier, but also work together amongst themselves to deliver a more holistic solution to the end buyer.
Great stuff, Mike. And I should have mentioned up front to everybody in the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in chat. When we do these LinkedIn Live sessions, it's great when it's interactive. And Mike and I are happy to respond to questions that you have as we discuss planning for 2021. Mike, what about for thinking about technology and the role of technology? You had mentioned that was a key part of planning for 2021, the role of e-commerce. How does that take on even more importance in a sort of uncertain year? When you think about the pandemic we've had, the uncertainty going into 2021, what is the role of sort of thinking about technology and e-commerce in that kind of environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to kind of set some context, this is not a discussion of unique, detailed technology, but really how, as sales leaders, we could take advantage of technology and how we should be directing our sales operations and sales enablement and IT organizations to give us the tools and data and insights that we really need in order to make good decisions and allow our sales force to execute in an efficient and really effective way. So when we think about data and technology, the sales leader, we looked at some studies and we see that on average in a selling in a sales cycle that the buyer interacts with the seller on average 18 times. So in those 18 interactions, there are opportunities where both you as a selling organization can capture information. You can capture information about what the buyers are doing and what actions they're taking. And you also capture information about what your sales force is doing. And that using all of that, and if you start to tie that together with outcomes, whether that was a good outcome, meaning you've moved the buyer through the buyer's journey, you're progressing it, or actually closing on a sale or one sale or a lost sale. But now you can take some of that data and build more insights into what are the most effective steps through the process. So that's one of really managing the buyer's experience and helping enable reps to become more competitive and more successful in that process. So that's really some of the things that we're thinking about when we say use technology for a competitive advantage.
Great. We have a question that came in, Mike, from the audience. I think it's Karen or Karen. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But she asked, what do you mean building in more discipline in their prospect approach? Can you give examples?
Yeah, sure, Karen. So when we talk about that, what we see is traditionally in the selling, prospecting, and lead generation, it's often a pretty simplistic process, and then maybe an undisciplined process where we're giving sales reps simply a list of contacts, or not even a list of contacts, a list of accounts, and then telling them, go, good luck, go get them. And really thinking about, let's use a much more disciplined approach with detailed playbooks, very well-defined contact lists that are based on your ideal customer profile, that you've got well-defined personas within that, and that you're enabling your reps with the right messaging for each persona and maybe even with each segment or industry. And then you define specific cadences for them to execute on in that process. And then even going back to the technology point of view, is there are a number of systems now that really enable things like AI-based dynamic guided selling or sales content management systems that provide the right assets along the buyer's journey and the seller's process to help enable them to be more effective in that lead gen and prospecting phase.
Great. Let's turn our attention, Mike, now to the idea of thinking about how to plan a number for 2021 and how to do that, right? And make sure you come up with a number. And Mike, I know you and I in our conversations with our sales leader clients, one of the hardest things they struggle with is, what should I agree to for next year? And for so long, this has been sort of a bottoms-up approach, right? Most sales leaders have relied on, well, let me go to my sales team, let me have them roll up for my largest accounts, what those accounts will do next year. Invariably, the sales team knows what's going on. They under forecast because clearly they think it's a quota setting exercise. And the sales leader is then set up to go into the CEO and tell the CEO they're going to shrink by 5% next year. And we all know that that's what happens and hurts sales leaders' credibility when they don't have access to that data. And so sales leaders, particularly in this year, looking at the pandemic saying, how the heck do I know what's going to happen next year? How the heck can I forecast? I know the CEO wants that. But what we're telling sales leaders and our clients right now for the audience is, you have to make sure you arm yourself with third-party data. This is a year where you have to go out and make sure that you have that third-party data that tells you. What do you expect your technology category to grow by? What is the forecast for this year? Maybe you have scenarios A, B, and C based on third-party forecasting. What is the growth rate of your technology category by industry? For example, certain industries will grow faster in 2021 for your technology because of the fact that they are healthy industries. How does that impact also coverage and where you decide to assign your reps for next year? Then you have to make sure you have a very disciplined sales planning process and that you've thought through step by step what is the approach you're going to take, and that you actually make sure you do it early. So many sales leaders right now, you're in the thick of things. Planning is probably due by December 31st, so you can roll out your plans in January 1. We might have some sales leaders out there that start April 1st that are sort of more comfortably starting this planning process, but you got to start early. We have lots of data that shows sales leaders don't leave enough time. That delays the rollout of their compensation, their quotas, that delays the actual productivity gains that you get to a fast start, particularly in a SaaS model. And you have to make sure you get your stakeholders involved early. So it's not just about sales coming up with a number. It's about engaging the CFO with the marketing leads to get alignment on what that number should be so that you get agreement and you're armed with that third-party data that validates it.
Yeah, absolutely, Phil. Some of the keys that you said is alignment with marketing and finance. Well, clearly finance from a perspective, do we have the right top line number, and are we all in agreement on that? But then for marketing as well is to ensure that marketing is developing opportunities in the target markets with the target personas that you're expecting. And some of that comes from looking at that market trend data and saying, yes, we all agree, this is our target market, these are our personas, so we can laser focus on that. That kind of goes back to Karen's earlier question about modernizing prospecting, where we're all in alignment targeting the right personas.
Yep, that's exactly right. So please, sales leaders out there, please, this is not a year to go in and use your gut-based approach. You need to be armed. When you go in and talk to the CEO and you sit down for that negotiation about what the number should be, you should have facts to be able to back up your arguments. You certainly want to have that bottoms-up forecast from your reps as another data point. But this is a year where you have to have facts that tell you the story of what is the expectation of growth for your industry or for your particular technology category, so that you have a basis of fact and data to negotiate that plan. And we all know the implications. If you sign up for a plan that's wrong, that's way too high, you're going to have a very painful year. You're going to have quotas that are too high for yourself. Your quotas for your reps are going to be too high. They're going to miss their number. They're going to be leaving because they're not making any money. You're going to have a morale problem. So it really cascades down. So it makes a lot of sense to make sure that you do that planning process right, that you have that data to set you up for success into 2021.
Phil, one of the things you mentioned too is the quota setting process. So obviously as a sales leader, you want to make sure that the top line number is right. But then especially in these times of uncertainty, if we're uncertain whether the market's growing or not, and we're kind of making some guesses, then typically as a sales leader, what I would do is push out a heavy overassignment down to my reps and managers. And boy, if you're doing that and you get too much of a layer of overassignment out there, then and you're really overassigning them to a point where it's unachievable at the rep level, then you start to have attrition, performance problems, challenges, and then that affects your sales organization. It also affects the buyer experience and reputation of that. And some of those, when you break that connection between seller and buyer, it's very hard to rebuild that. And that's costly. That's an expense that it's hard to count, but as we all know, as sales, that's a really big expense to our organization.
It is. I couldn't agree with you more. And so, the implications are obviously, and we see this all the time, don't we, Mike? I mean, we have sales leaders who have 30% over assignment, 35% over assignment from their level down to the rep level. That's way too much. Our best practice is no more than 10% assignment from the VP of sales all the way down to the rep level. You need some protection, but you can't overdo it like you're saying. So got to make sure you've done that right and thought that through so you have the right protection, but you're setting your reps up for success. The other thing we see too is it takes, typically a company 3 to 4 months to replace someone, to fill an open rec, and then another 6 to 8 months to onboard them. So if you're losing reps in the beginning of the year, you're essentially getting no productivity or very little productivity out of that rep, because it's going to take you 3 to 4 months to fill the spot where you're already in April, May, and it's going to take you another 6 to 8 months to actually fully ramp them. You've lost that productivity for a full rep, and you're going to have a hard time making your numbers. So it's a really bad spiral that you go down. If you don't set yourself up for success, if you don't walk in and get a number you can achieve, you end up with the numbers too high, you overassign. That's going to cause major problems downstream, isn't it, Mike?
It absolutely does. And that's something that we can avoid by doing the detailed planning up front and kind of looking at with some data and insights that helps us avoid that consequence.
Got another question that just came in here, Mike. Having the right technology and process and people to digitize the sales process is one thing, but in the end, this is from Simon, but in the end, it's about people and adoption of new tools. What are some of the adoption techniques you have been successful with? Great question, Simon. Thanks for shouting that out.
Yeah, so Simon, good question, and that's a really key point about implementing technology is, of course, there's the technical aspect of it, but the people aspect is just as important. Is understanding how can you enable your reps to be confident in using that technology, regardless of whether it's a forecasting system or your SFA system or something more advanced where it's really engaging in clients. And that comes out to be a factor of leveraging your sales enablement team. And your sales enablement team can really look at what are the competencies required to be successful in the task that you've outlined, whether that be a prospecting task or a forecasting task. But let's say prospecting. Where do they find and they're trying to do an asset management system. Where do they find assets? How do they leverage that sort of a system? And your sales enablement can map out what that process is, and then what are the competencies and skills that are required for each of the reps and other roles, because there are other roles that are involved in that. So they should map out a competency map that's required, and then put together an enablement plan to ensure that the reps can adopt that technology, be successful with it.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that, Mike, on top of what you said for Simon, is that also the hardest thing that sales leaders really struggle with today is really trying to prioritize what technology investments to make. There's so many sales technologies out there right now, a lot of them saying that they improve sales productivity. And so as a sales leader, our clients all the time are saying, well, how do I choose between these? And one of the things that you should think about doing is something we call the sales activity study, which is what we do with a lot of our clients, extraordinarily valuable. It allows you to get input from the field, exactly what are the biggest challenges, what's taking their time away from spending time in front of clients. And from that, you can get a really quick view and distill down what are the productivity challenges that you could possibly improve through both process improvement and through technology adoption. And then you can laser focus on the technologies that you purchase that will actually help the reps based on what they said their problems were. So you're not going into technology purchases based on an assumption of what you think the problems are. You're doing it based on what your reps have told you, both anecdotally and through the data they've given you about where's their time being wasted. And then you can use that as part of your plan to put in place technology, so they're going to be more apt to adopt it because it's really speaking to the problem that they have. We see that a lot of the same problems come up over and over again when we do these sales activity studies. Things like way too many meetings, things like way too much internal communication, things like too long to turn around quotes. These are process problems, but in some cases you can also use technology to help with them. And finding content comes up all the time. That's one of the top 5. I can't find content, takes too long. Again, these are opportunities to automate, to use technology. You have to have underlying process improvement as well. We know technology is not a panacea, but keep that in mind, Simon.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the sales activity study, for those of you that aren't familiar, it's an offering that we have where we look at what are sales reps spending their time on, and we study 39 different activities that the reps are doing in a typical week, and engage that against the 25,000 other sales professionals that we've studied, and give you as a leader some deep insights into what are the inhibitors of their productivity. I just had a readout of a study actually earlier this morning with a client, and they looked at where their reps were spending time, and it was immediately obvious. I mean, it was still a lot of work to do to analyze their data, but to them, their reps were spending almost 4.5 hours a week on prospecting. Well, why? Well, they had misalignment with their business development and marketing function, and that was obvious. So they could literally use technology to help align those two functions, and that the SLAs between the two organizations, and lead handover and routing and qualification and scoring. So that was something that it'll be an immediate benefit, because if we can capture and save some time on the reps side and move that to a lower cost BDR, SDR function, that's going to save money, but also enable the reps to spend more time focusing on closing deals rather than the top part of the funnel.
Another question came in, Mike. I'll take the first shot at this. Nestor asked how to integrate, align, build, join plans with channel partners, indirect sales. So Nestor, what we would recommend, and we do to our clients all the time, is to have a joint business planning process with your partners. Really, it starts also with obviously figuring out in segmentation which of your partners are ones that you want to commit to and invest in. And I say that, I don't say that lightly. So many of our clients end up with partners that most of them are not productive. A very small set of partners drive the majority of the growth. It's actually not healthy to have lots of partners that aren't doing anything and aren't contributing to your growth. It's counterproductive. So we're big fans of segmenting and figuring out which of your partners do you want to invest in, and then making sure you have a joint business planning process that's been instituted that uses a standardized joint business planning template that those business partners and your channel account managers do jointly together to determine what is going to be the goals of that channel partner for that year for your products and services, and it gets their commitment. And frankly, we're big believers that if a channel partner says they don't want to do that business plan, that's a red flag about their commitment to your organization. So it's a really good way. And we just published a select practice, which is basically a case study of a client who did this, saw incredible results about revamping the joint planning process. But that should be part of what you're doing to help your channel partners make sure they're planning to help your growth and fit into the overall plan for the sales organization. Mike, anything to add there?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that makes that process really successful is starting with an ideal partner profile.
Yeah.
So as a supplier, if you define what your ideal partner profile is, both from a performance perspective, what are you expecting them to do and how are they performing, but also from some non-performance related characters, like Phil just said, like commitment to you as a supplier. And kind of defining exactly what some of those commitment things are. So, for example, are they going to dedicate reps to you as a supplier? Are they going to ensure that those reps are going to be certified on your products or consume certain amounts of enablement? And those are really not necessarily performance metrics. Are they driving business, but are they committed to you as a supplier and an organization? And then you can clearly in your joint business planning, ensure that everyone's clear on the performance metrics and those things like commitment metrics.
Yeah, and I'll add that to one thing. Just kind of made me think of one thing to make sure I emphasize to you all out there who are thinking about planning. Please, and this is what kind of Mike stimulated with the ideal partner profile. Please make sure during planning that you are, as part of the planning process, we've got a step-by-step planning model that walks through how to do planning right. But one of the key steps is the go-to-market architecture, which is essentially helping you and marketing and product align on what are your best opportunities to grow. And that sounds so easy and so simple. Yeah, I know that. Most organizations do a very poor job of this, very poor. And what happens is that product marketing and sales go into the year with a different expectation of where they plan to grow. And that means they're investing their resources in different areas, it's so counterproductive. And you wonder why a lot of go-to-market engines are inefficient. That's because product is building a product for one ideal customer profile. Marketing is marketing to a different target market or a different ideal customer profile. And sales finally is selling to the organization they believe is the right ideal customer profile. And when I say it like that, isn't it obvious that that's inefficient? You're not taking all your resources and putting the wood behind the arrow. So part of planning, which is so critical, is prioritization. Getting agreement and alignment on where do we believe our best opportunities to grow and where are we not going to focus? Where are we not going to invest resources so that we could rather go deeper in the areas where we believe we have the best success? And that's what Mike was saying for the partner. It's the same thing on the ideal customer partner profile. You've got to think through, not that we're going to sign up all kinds of partners so I can tell everybody how many partners I have, but sign up the right kinds of partners that link to where you're trying to grow and ultimately make those successful by doubling down resources on them and not trying to sign up lots of partners. And so you can show that you have a real vanity slide full of lots of partners. And that's a really critical thing about planning. Prioritization. And it's very hard as companies get bigger and have more products and more markets they go after, it gets even harder. But please take the time up front, sit down with product marketing and sales, get in a room, argue about where your target markets are, agree on that. And then you're going to have a lot easier year because you're going to get the support of marketing and product as you try to make the number in 2021.
Hey, Phil, there's a question, but before you do, one point, a pet peeve of mine in planning. You said prioritization, and a pet peeve of mine is, prioritization and good strategic planning is not just about what you will do, but what you won't do.
Yeah.
And organizations and sales leaders need to be really disciplined. We need to be focused as sales leaders. So what is it that I will not do? What am I not going to focus on? And make that crystal clear between product, marketing, so your sales force isn't distracted by things that are edge cases. That invariably takes more resources than you ever expect. It's like building a project. It always costs double and takes twice as long.
Mike, I think we have time for one final question. It's Jen asks, how early at a company should you be investing in a content management platform, and who should own building this out, assuming sales enablement or portfolio marketing? Question mark. You want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So good question, Jen. So I'll answer the second part of it first. So we look at, for sales leaders, so we have a bit of perspective, but we think it's sales enablement should guide that process, because really you're looking at the enablement team being responsible for enabling all frontline client-facing roles. But portfolio marketing needs to contribute to that, and sales enablement becomes more of an orchestrator. Sales enablement may not actually create any of the content. It may come from portfolio marketing, for example, or other sources. So I'd say sales enablement as the orchestrator of that process, with contribution from whatever sources of content are best and optimal within your organization. So how soon should you organize or invest in a content management system? It really depends on the complexity of your product and your selling process. So when that process becomes more than can be quickly enabled in a few conversations between a coach, a sales manager, team leader, and that you've got enough content that has multiple versions for industry segment by product, that then really looking at some sort of a content management system really becomes more a better return on that investment. So I say relatively early, you can use some simple technologies and file sharing, but then you start to look very quickly at a full-on system for that.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'll add to that, Mike, is, as you know, we have research on what are foundational sales technologies and what are advanced sales technologies, and we put the content management platform in the foundational category. I mean, it's like CRM and content management, so it's a very important part of your overall technology and infrastructure that you want to put in place for sales. Again, we work with clients all the time to audit their current infrastructure and to help them make decisions and prioritization of where they invest, because there's a lot of technologies out there, and you want to make sure you're investing in the right ones to help your team, but not overinvest and have a lot of technologies that aren't being used, which is the critical piece, right?
Right. Yeah, it's because they have to be used. And I think the earlier question is, you need to enable reps to be successful with it. It's not just implementing the technology and rolling it out, but ensuring that they're consumed and adopted by the sales force and utilized for success.
Yep. I don't think I see any final questions, but hopefully everyone in the audience has gotten great value out of it. You can tell from Mike and me, we enjoy talking about this. Planning is something that, again, it's so critical to get this right, so you're set up for success. You do not want to start the year in 2021 with a number that you know in your heart you can't make. It's going to make for a very, very difficult year for you and your sales team. And so please take the time to make sure you do the planning process right. Make sure you gave yourself a third-party data and arm yourself with that, so you have good, constructive conversations with your CEO and with the board. And make sure you engage stakeholders and do it early. And as Mike said, some of these planning assumptions he and his team put together are fantastic. Take those into account when you're thinking about 2021 and consider what you need to invest to get to your numbers. So thanks very much, everybody. I hope everybody has a terrific rest of the day and a great weekend. Thank you.